Welcome to this video from the Consultants Development Institute. If you've already seen any of the videos in this series, then I ask your patience as I repeat some information that you've already heard. For some viewers, this might be their first video. I'm Priscilla Watson with CDI, and I'm presenting Facilitating Group Decision Making and Problem Solving. Let's look at the outcomes that we intended for this video. As a facilitator, you can make or break the success of a group. Be very careful about the influence that you might have on the members of a group. The best way to do that is to always use certain primary goals and working assumptions as a facilitator. We'll review those roles and goals. It's also extremely important that consultants and leaders be able to successfully design and facilitate groups, especially working groups, for a wide variety of purposes and applications. We'll review guidelines to do that. Too many people complain that their time is utterly wasted in meetings, so we'll review guidelines for you to effectively manage meetings. We'll share advice for when and how you should intervene in the group process in order to move members forward towards their purpose and goals. You should know how to cultivate maximum participation and engagement of your group members, so we'll share guidelines for that very important goal. You should also be able to work with a variety of cultures and personalities in groups to help members to make decisions and solve problems. We'll share advice for addressing that major role in facilitation. And we'll also suggest how you can recognize constructive conflict from destructive conflict and know how to guide your members through that destructive conflict and onto results that your group members can build on. First, let's talk about some terms. Many people see the word team as meaning a more highly structured collection of people than does the word group. We recognize those differences. Because of the broad audience intended for this video, we'll interchange the use of both words. Experts on groups suggest that a group has a maximum number of 10 to 12 people. This might seem like an arbitrary assertion, but it's not. Groups that are larger than that tend to have another level of complexity that's similar to large organizations. For example, they have their own various subcultures, leadership styles, and levels of communication. It's important to recognize that there are different overall types of groups. For example, in self-organized teams, all aspects of the group, including purpose and goals and membership, are decided by the members themselves. Self-directed groups are usually assigned a purpose and goals, but it's up to the members to decide how to work toward them. Self-managed teams are assigned even more direction, for example, the group's membership and group process, but it's up to the team members to drive themselves to make that process occur. There are different applications for groups, too. For example, discussion groups, focus groups, committees, clusters of learners going through a training program, and boards of directors. Members can meet face-to-face or communicate by using various types of technologies in these applications. Groups also have various stages of development. They start with a forming stage when they first come together and understand their purpose. Next, they often go through a storming phase, when each member is still a bit unsettled about what the group is to do and about the different personalities in the group. Hopefully, they evolve to a norming stage, when they're comfortably operating within the purpose and processes of the group. The ultimate goal is to achieve a performing stage, when they're very efficiently operating within the group. The focus of this video is on the basic best practices for using facilitation as one of several methods during consulting. This video does not convey all of the knowledge needed to understand all facets of facilitating for all applications of facilitation. The focus of this video is especially on work groups. That is, groups committed to a common purpose, such as making a decision or solving a problem, or undergoing planning and development, such as development of a board of directors, or developing a strategic plan. Work groups are commonly operating inside of organizations. As a facilitator, you guide and support group members to achieve what the group members, or their bosses, have determined to be the purpose and goals of the group. Success might be making a certain decision or solving a certain problem. The group might meet once or more to achieve that success. You focus on the process of how your members work together, not on the content or subject matter that they are working on. Think of process as being how the group members work and think of content as being what they work on. For example, if the group is focused on designing a certain product, then you would focus on helping members to best participate and communicate in the group, but you would not help them in developing a product. Your aim is to be neutral in the group, to work from the nature and needs of your group members rather than from your own. That's why it's very important for you to have a strong understanding of yourself as a facilitator, including your styles and biases, as we learned in the earlier CDI course, Understanding Yourself as a Consultant. You'll remember from the earlier course, Roles, Goals, and Reasons in Consulting, that the current client is the person or group who is most important for you to work with now, because your current client determines what success is in the project and has the most influence towards achieving that success. As a facilitator, your current client is usually the group itself. Your contract is with the members of the group, as we talked about in the earlier course, Collaborative Consulting for Performance Change and Learning. You might also contract with a sponsor, that is, a person who is officially responsible for the group to achieve success. It could be someone in human resources who is responsible to ensure that the group gets set up and operates successfully, including getting sufficient resources. Roger Schwartz, in his seminal book, The Skilled Facilitator, differentiates between basic facilitation, where the facilitator primarily helps the group to achieve its goal, and developmental facilitation, where the facilitator helps members to learn about the group process, and perhaps about themselves at the same time. In our earlier course, Roles, Goals, and Reasons in Consulting, we learned that a consultant is anyone who's guiding and supporting a person or group, that is, a client, to change, but has no direct authority to make the client change. A facilitator, just like an advisor or coach, is a consultant. In that earlier course, we reviewed Peter Block's suggested goals and assumptions. So now, as a facilitator, you should be adopting those goals and assumptions. As a reminder, the goals were to cultivate a collaborative relationship with your client, to empower your clients to solve similar future problems by themselves, and focus on the project, that is, on the group process, but also on honoring the relationships that you have formed with the people involved. The working assumptions included: problems require accurate information to solve. In this case, the term problem would refer to the decision or problem that the group is to address. Also, that decisions require free and open choices among group members. You should not direct or make your clients do something that they don't want to do. Action should be decided by the clients themselves. Last, implementation requires the internal commitment of your clients. They should take ownership and responsibility in the implementation of their actions and in the results of their actions. You should share your goals and assumptions with your clients during the contracting phase of your project. Let's look at that phase now. Whether you are an external or internal consultant, or even a leader who will be facilitating a group, you should contract with your group. That might not be the very comprehensive and formal process that an external consultant does with a client, but it should be a deliberate process whereby the members of the group understand and accept your role in the group. As we talked about in the course Collaborative Consulting for Performance Change and Learning, your goals in the contract phase include to establish a successful relationship with your client in order to understand each other's styles and preferences, and to understand your client's needs. For example, what decision or problem needs to be addressed by your facilitating? Another goal is to answer the key question, who is the current client? Be sure to distinguish between the official client who signs your paycheck and the real client who has the most influence in achieving success. Also, learn about your client's organization, its overall culture, and the culture of the areas in which your group members work. Answer the key question, is your client really ready for a consulting project? Can they make time for the meetings and the learning that are necessary to achieve success in the project? Next, you and your client might do a formal agreement, using a letter of agreement or contract. You might even want a detailed contract that specifies the structures of the group that you will be working with. We'll talk about structures in the next slide. It's best for working groups to have some structures that support the group's facilitation and its evolution through the stages of development. Here is a comprehensive list of structures for building an optimum group or team. You should work with your client to explain and establish those structures. This video includes a handout that lists the following structures. Let's look at each one now. First, ensure that the group members have the strong support of their management. Management needs to agree on the goals of the group and support the members' participation in the group. Management also needs to provide sufficient resources in terms of funding, expertise, and facilities. Your group needs a clearly specific purpose and goal. Goals might be, for example, to produce a project report that includes a project plan, schedule, and budget for the month of January, or a goal of make a strategic decision about the future of a certain product. Communicate the goals to the members of the group and allow time for discussing them. Decide the best membership of the group. The group should include members who have the interest and influence to achieve the goals of the group, and who also have their own supervisor's permission to attend the meetings of the group. Establish the roles that are needed in the group. Roles might include leadership, administration of meetings, facilitation, a recorder, and a timekeeper. People might rotate roles amongst themselves, depending on the current stage of development of the team, and on how far along they might be in achieving their goals. Decide the timing and frequency that are needed to achieve the goals. For instance, the deadline by which the goal of the group is to be achieved. Someone outside the group might decide that, or it might be decided by the members themselves. Timing also includes specifying the frequency of group meetings that are needed to achieve the goal of the group. If a goal of the group is for members to learn about their group process and about themselves in groups, then the groups will need sufficient time to stand back and reflect during their meetings. Let's look at some more structures. Determine the processes that members will use among themselves in the group. Processes might include specific ground rules for interaction, use of open discussion or roundtables to communicate among members, or consensus and voting to make decisions. The processes that members use to work together depend on the culture of the organization and on the members in the group. They also depend on the timing available to achieve the group's results and on the current stage of development of the group. This video includes a handout to help you determine the culture of a group. Identify any needs for training and materials. For example, members might benefit from a training that provides a brief overview of the typical stages of team development and the team's goals, structures, and processes to make decisions. Identify the cost to provide the necessary resources for the team. Consider costs such as paying employees to attend the meetings, hiring trainers, hiring consultants, renting rooms, and getting office supplies. Try to contact each team member before the first team meeting. It's often useful for you to contact each member, for example, to communicate the goals of the group, why that member was selected, the benefit of the goals to the organization and that member, the timing available to achieve the goal, and who will lead the team, at least initially. Invite the member to the first meeting of the group. Carefully plan the first meeting. In the first meeting, review the goals of the team, the benefit of the goals to the organization, the time frame for the team effort, who will lead the team, at least initially, when the team might meet and where, and any changes that have occurred since that first individual meeting with each member. Have this information written down to hand out to each member. At the end of the meeting, it's useful to ask each member to make a public commitment to the team effort. Consider whether any team building is needed to build strong trust and working relationships among members. Team building activities can include, for example, a retreat in which members introduce themselves, or any practice exercises in which members help each other solve a short problem or achieve a certain goal. Remember, this course includes a handout for you with this information. The previous course, Primary Methods and Myths in Consulting, very briefly touched on facilitating in consulting, along with the other methods of sharing advice and coaching. That course also suggested the best situations in which to facilitate. As a reminder, those situations included when the project needs the strong trust, commitment, and participation of others, for example, during a major project for change. Or when a group needs to make a challenging decision but might struggle to do so. For example, when members really need help to participate and focus together on the decision and how to make it. Or when a group might struggle to solve a complex problem. Your style of facilitation in these situations can vary. For example, during the forming and storming stages, you might be more directive and involved in helping your group members to understand their roles and the processes to use in the group. You might become less directly involved during the norming and performing stages, after your members have become more settled in their roles and are naturally conducting those group processes. But your style also depends on the culture of the group members, that is, how members prefer to make decisions and solve problems. For example, highly autocratic cultures would prefer a more direct style of facilitating. Cultures with more egalitarian and participatory values would want a less directive style. Many people complain that they waste a lot of time in meetings. Many times, that's because the structures were not carefully developed, or the meetings themselves were not managed very well. Here are some basic guidelines that set the foundation for a good meeting. Again, there's a handout with these guidelines. First, carefully start or open the meeting. Your opening should set the tone for the entire meeting. Ask if anyone is missing who should be present. Ask if introductions would be useful. Review the agenda and other structures of the meeting, including the group's purpose and goals. Ask for agreement on those structures. Clarify your roles for that meeting. For example, if you will be doing any training in addition to facilitating. Overall, model the kind of energy and participation that you would want from the members of the group. If the ground rules were not yet established, then do so now. Ground rules guide how the members are to participate. However, if the timing seems very tight for the meeting, then you might suggest certain ground rules for members to approve. For example, all meetings stop and start on time. Everyone participates. Focus on the topic. No interruptions. Manage the time in the meeting very carefully. One of the most difficult facilitation tasks is time management. In a highly energized meeting, time seems to run out before tasks are finished. Therefore, the biggest challenge is keeping the process moving. If you have a variety of tasks to do in the meeting, then you might consider asking the group for a volunteer to help you monitor the time. Evaluate the meeting during the meeting. Far too many meetings end up with members going out of the room and remarking to each other that the meeting was a total waste of time. Instead, get their impression during the meeting. Periodically conduct a 5-minute satisfaction check by having each member write down his or her rating of the quality of the meeting. One by one, ask each member to show that written rating to the other group members and to share any suggestions to improve the meeting. Evaluate the meeting near the end. That might include evaluating how far along the group is in meeting its goal and also the quality of the meeting's process itself. That evaluation can go into the next step of capture the learning from the meeting. Too often we forget this step. Ask members what new knowledge, skills, and abilities were gleaned from the meeting. Perhaps have one or two members share that learning out loud. Close the meeting. Review actions and assignments from the meeting and assign someone to distribute the minutes. Establish the time, location, and agenda items for the next meeting. Confirm which group members can make it to the next meeting. Should others be invited? If so, who are they and who will invite them? An intervention is a facilitator's technique to stop a destructive process or enhance a constructive process in a group. Some of the most common situations that require interventions are when ground rules are being broken, the group seems stalled or stuck, there is prolonged conflict among members, or some members are not participating. The nature of the intervention depends on the nature of the current process in the group. There are a wide variety of techniques for intervening. Many people do not even realize that those techniques are actually interventions. For example, a good facilitator can have a powerful influence on group members by asking powerful questions, such as, what are we learning from this experience? How might we improve how we're operating? An upcoming course on coaching will share useful questions to ask. Most people think of intervening as some form of confrontation, for example, confronting an unruly group member. Actually, this type of intervention might be used much less frequently than many others on this list. Facilitators can help group members by making suggestions, for example, suggestions about useful tools or about how to improve the group process. Experienced facilitators are usually very good at providing other perspectives on a situation. If group members seem stuck in how they perceive a situation, the facilitator might use certain tools to help them see it differently. For example, by using de Bono's 6 hats or a force field analysis. Facilitators should always be sure to remind members of the ground rules when they seem to be breaking them. Ground rules basically set the personality of how the group wants to operate. Another way of intervening is by structuring activities. For example, which activities should occur and in what order. The facilitator needs to be careful here, though, that he isn't actually becoming a strong group leader rather than a facilitator. Summarizing and paraphrasing are also powerful techniques, especially to help group members to move along in their process. The upcoming course on coaching will share guidelines about summarizing and paraphrasing. Unless the situation is around a major destructive conflict that is currently causing harm to someone, you should be careful not to take away the group member's responsibility for the operations of the group. At the end of this video, we'll show an example of how you might manage a destructive conflict in a group. For now, we'll address behavior that seems to be detracting from the progress of the group. For example, if members keep breaking a ground rule, if they continue to stray from the agenda, or if they keep leaving the room when they shouldn't. When you need to intervene, it's best to do so authentically, as we've talked about in previous CDI courses. When you first see what seems to be an unconstructive behavior, you might wait to see if it happens more than once. This will ensure that your perception is accurate and that the behavior was intentional. When you are convinced that a certain specific behavior was intentional, try the following quick but powerful technique. First, briefly describe to the group what you are seeing or hearing in the here and now that leads you to conclude that there is a problem. Do not just report what you feel or sense, try to be more specific about what you're seeing or hearing. Then ask the group what they want to do about the situation. Give them a specific amount of time to decide. Be silent for a while and let the group respond. Ask them for a decision. If they don't have one, you might give one suggestion. Then you might repeat steps 2 and 3 until they accept a decision. This approach is clear and concise, is not necessarily judgmental, and puts the onus for the behavior on the group as far as what should be done about it. Some facilitators prefer to put names to the member or members who have those detracting behaviors, while other facilitators tend to be more general. That's up to the facilitator's judgment and to the culture of the organization. Again, we have a handout for you with this information. Now is a good time to pause and reflect on what you've heard so far. In your learning journal, answer the following questions. What do you think of the suggested structures for groups? Are they complete? Which would work best in the kinds of groups that you work with or want to work with? How do you best intervene in the groups that you work with or want to work with? Is a more assertive style needed or a different style? Why? Pause the video and give this some thought. Perhaps discuss these questions with peers and then write your answers in your journal. Much of what supports the active participation of group members lies in how the meeting is designed and managed. This is true whether you are an external or internal consultant. Let's look first at what you can do to maximize participation while preparing for the meeting and during its opening. Consider meeting off-site, away from where the members of the group normally work. This minimizes interruptions and the members' preoccupation with their day-to-day activities. A few slides ago, we talked about other things to do during the opening of a meeting. The items that I'm listing now are especially geared to increase the participation of members. At the beginning of each meeting, do an icebreaker, even if they're only quickly sharing information about themselves. The free management library, listed in CDI's learning management system, has numerous icebreakers you could use. Have each member state what he or she wants from the meeting. Ask each member of the group to help others achieve their goals for the meeting. Post a sheet of each person's wants. Review this list at the end of the meeting. If a member is absent from a meeting, acknowledge who is missing and find out why. Also, review ground rules, including the ground rule that everyone participates. Here are some more ideas, this time to use during the meeting. Build in physical movement periodically throughout the meeting. That can make a huge difference, especially to members who prefer to learn by touch or by experiencing something. Ask open-ended questions to cultivate discussion and reflection among members. This can be very powerful, not only for engaging members, but for generating ideas and learning. Respectfully call on quiet people. For example, Tom, you seem very thoughtful. What do you think about this? You might temporarily share the facilitation role or some aspect of the role with someone else. Seeing someone else in that role can bring a lot of variety and more energy to the group. Remind the group of its purpose and how that purpose benefits the members of the group. If you feel the group is still too quiet, then be authentic about it. For example, tell the group, "I notice the group is quiet." Then ask them if they have any suggestions about how to increase participation. There are two primary and contrasting approaches to making decisions in groups. In the autocratic approach, an authority figure ultimately makes the decision. That person might hear from some or all of the members, but ultimately makes the decision. The collaborative approach makes a decision that is based on the preferences of most or all of the members of the group. The choice of which approach to use depends on a variety of factors, including the culture of the organization and its members. If the culture is highly autocratic, with a strong top-down hierarchy, then the autocratic approach will likely be used. If the culture is highly participatory, then a collaborative approach is much more useful. In a collaborative approach, if there isn't much time to make the decision, then the group might decide to take a vote. If more time is available, and the group wants to ensure the strong buy-in of the group, then they might choose to arrive at a consensus. This method is often used to accomplish significant change in an organization because of the strong buy-in that it produces among members. The purpose of the voting technique is to make a selection from among various alternatives. For example, to elect the most important or desired item from a list of items by ranking them, or to select a range of the most important or desired items from a list of items by rating them. There are a variety of approaches to the voting technique. You might use a quick show of hands. This is the most common approach. Simply ask for a show of hands about each item on a list, one at a time, and the item that gets the most hands is the item selected from the list. Then there's ranking. Ranking is assigning one distinct value to each item to determine the single most important item from a list. For example, a ranked list would have one item ranked as 1, another as 2, another as 3, etc. You could use a rating approach. Rating is associating a value with each item in order to identify ranges of items from a list. Several items can have the same value associated with them. For example, a rated list might have several items rated as high, medium, or low, or as 1, 2, or 3. You could use a technique known as dot voting. In dot voting, each member gets a certain number of dots, or votes, that he or she can use to vote for items on a list. The number of dots that they get is usually equal to the number of choices that are to be made from a list. For example, if 3 items are to be selected, then each member gets 3 dots. Each member walks up to the list of items and places their dots next to the items to indicate their preferences. After all members have cast their votes, the items that receive the most votes get selected from the list. The dot voting technique has variations. Different colored dots can represent more than one vote or even a negative vote. Sometimes each participant is given one vote of each weight and required to apply each vote to a different item. In other cases, a member is allowed to cast multiple votes for one item. Let's look at the very powerful method of reaching consensus. There are different interpretations of the term consensus. To some, it means unanimous and strong agreement. To others, it means that every member of the group can live with the group's final decision. Consensus is often the means by which highly participatory groups reach their decisions, especially if they favor a highly egalitarian approach to decision-making. Here's one approach to reach consensus. Before the meeting, scope the decision or problem to be addressed. It is often best if the decision is written in the form of a yes-no question or a choice from among several options. For example, should we approve item A or item B? Or should we hire Tom or Sarah? Have specific ground rules to use during the consensus process. Explain these ground rules to other members of the group. For example, members do not interrupt each other. Members can disagree with each other. Members do not engage in side discussions. Silence is considered agreement with the decision to be made. When a decision is reached by consensus, all members act as a united front to support the decision. Then, guide your members through the following procedure to be accomplished within a certain time frame. The course has a handout for you to use to do this procedure. Each member gets equal time to explain a preference that is doable regarding the problem or decision faced by the group. The member shares the reasons for that preference. The most senior leader or manager in the group voices his or her opinion last. After a member has explained a preference and the reasons for it, then all members take a quiet minute to collect their own thoughts in response to that member. They decide what they have in common with the speaker or how they would be willing to compromise. At the deadline for the consensus process, you pose what seems to be the most common perspective voiced by the members, and you ask all members if they can support that perspective. If no consensus is reached, then members might choose one of the following options. They can have a discussion based on what was learned from the consensus activity so far and try again to see if a consensus can be achieved. Or they can ask for further research to be done by a certain time and then do the consensus process again. Or they can consider using a vote to decide. Now let's talk about how to manage a destructive group conflict. When managing group conflict, it's important first to verify that the group is indeed in some type of destructive conflict. They might not be in destructive conflict at all. Robust groups might have constructive conflict if members feel comfortable with sharing their views and with not always agreeing with each other. A good facilitator can guide and support a group through constructive conflict by using various interventions and methods of group decision-making and problem-solving. However, destructive conflict is more of a challenge, but it should be recognized and addressed as soon as possible. Conflict is destructive if it is continually preventing members from coming to an agreement. Use your eyes and ears to detect if a conflict is destructive. For example, watch for repeated name-calling, yelling, or ranting, or some people refusing to participate. There are numerous ways to try to manage group conflict. The best approach depends on the culture of the organization and its members, the timeliness that's needed for an agreement among members, and the resources available to come to that agreement. Here's a process that's been used successfully many times. The process is also in the handouts for this video. First, ask the group to quietly listen to you for 5 minutes without interrupting. Don't yell. Be surprisingly calm. Next, tell the group that it has evolved into a destructive conflict about the decision and share the evidence of what you are seeing or hearing that leads you to that conclusion. Stick to your evidence. Do not diagnose the causes of the conflict. If you are interrupted, then ask the group again if they will quietly listen to you for 3 minutes. Add that you are not blaming anyone. Now become a bit more assertive. Remind the group of its purpose, of the reason they came together in the first place. Then assert, if this conflict continues, we won't be making progress toward our goal. Then assert a specific procedure to them. Next, I'll share a procedure that I've used successfully in the past. The following procedure is specified in a handout for this video. First, ask the group to take a 10-minute break away from the room. Suggest that they talk about something other than the topic of this discussion. After they come back, specify the following procedure. It requires about 5 minutes from each member, but it's very powerful to use. The group takes 5 quiet minutes for each member to write down his or her preference regarding the decision or problem that the group is working on now, including the advantages and disadvantages of that preference. Then each person, one at a time, gets 4 quiet minutes to share that information, along with the advantages and disadvantages of the person's preferences. Afterwards, there can be 1 minute of questions to the member, but only to clarify what he or she has said. After each member has been heard from, then call a vote to select the option that most of the members prefer for now. If 1 or 2 members start strongly disagreeing with the procedure that you suggested, then tell the group, it appears that we indeed are stalled for now. Then ask them what they want to do about it and give them 10 minutes to express their frustration. At the end of 10 minutes, ask them what they want to do. By now, they've usually calmed down enough to refocus on the original purpose of why they came together. Many times, they're now ready to do the voting procedure that you had first suggested. Now's a good time to pause again and reflect on what you've heard so far in this video. In your learning journal, answer the following questions. Would the suggested guidelines for maximizing participation work well with the types of groups that you work with or want to work with? If not, what other suggestions do you have? There are many ways to deal with conflict in groups. What is your best approach? Pause the video and give this some thought. Perhaps discuss these questions with peers and then write your answers in your journal. If you ever have any questions or want to share feedback during the series, simply send us an email at info@consultantsdevelopmentinstitute.org. And thank you so much for your time during this presentation.